Hello, and thank you very much for coming along. This evening we're going to look at this whole question of how can we start a serious conversation, an adult conversation, with our young adults, with children who have to live in a world that's now been created beyond their control and is largely out of control. This is difficult, very difficult, and in fact it is particularly difficult for parents who haven't figured out what is going on as well, which is a large portion of us. We're still in many states of semi-awareness and in some cases total ignorance about what is occurring around us in the environment and in the climate, and we're just learning. So the usual transmission of information and knowledge from one generation to the next is not quite happening correctly. In fact, children are learning about the environment and about climate very rapidly, but largely in spite of their parents, or in spite of the institutions that surround them, their schools, their churches, even the NGOs that they reach out to learn about on the web and things. It's a very confusing time for children, and I want to talk a bit about this whole problem of how can we get across to our children a sense of urgency, a sense of purpose, a sense of mission on their own part. So we're going to be looking at a series of questions that in effect focus on what can we say to our children? Adult talk on speaking with children about science and survival. It's come down to that because the science is more and more clear, even if it's hard for some adults to absorb it, and maybe some political figures even to understand it. But in any case, we're up against a real problem that has been highlighted in the highest circles. In fact, the issue was brought to the attention of the world at the UN not too long ago, back in 2015. The Secretary General, in effect, called a number of people together to talk about the youth voice before the meetings in Paris, before December 2015. So in February 2015, they started to focus on these issues and present material to the Secretary General to encourage him to give voice to the youth voice at the Paris meetings. Let's take a look.
I want to thank everyone that has made this possible at the UNA, and particularly Secretary General, who gave us the dignity and, in a sense, the challenge to take this forward today. I wanted to focus particularly on what's at stake in Paris, and the whole question of the youth voice and the human prospect. Because if the youth voice doesn't get voiced in Paris, the human prospect is not very bright.
Well, that's it. If the human prospect is not bright, it's because the youth have not been listened to. Well, if you listen to the youth, one of the things they're impatient with is any sort of reference to the past. And they kind of start by saying, well, what can we learn from the past? There hasn't been much done. And those of us who are involved in education want them to look at the deep past, not just the recent past, but the deep past. And we can, in fact, all learn a great deal from the deep past, like the ice record and the atmospheric record throughout the geologic history. We can all learn a lot if we start listening to the scientists who are telling us about this deep past.
We can actually learn a lot. And people say, oh yeah, ice ages have always been, they've come and gone. Yeah, that's true down here. But what happens when you alter the atmospheric carbon, push it way up here? guess what's coming? It's a convergence of crises that can be seen in a graph over the last 100 years or so, from 1900, 1925, 1950, 1975, 2000, shortly after 2000, in your lifetimes, is a convergence of peak oil starting to decline, population continuing to increase, and heat budget of the Earth sort of massively increasing in this short period of time. This was a graph done in 2008, and basically it's continued since then. So much so that we've begun to have second thoughts about first principles. As Sir Nicholas Stern put it, free market advocates have constructed a global system that has led to what Sir Nicholas Stern called the largest, the greatest, market failure the world has ever seen. It's time to rethink these principles, perhaps, as modes of governance. The Union of Concerned Scientists, along with the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, has actually moved the minutes to midnight forward because of that kind of crisis. Now, here's where I think the UNA can play a key role, because you got to ask yourself, we're a fossil fuel dependent civilization, independent of what nationality we are. Our modern civilization is dependent on fossil fuels. We have to get to being a solar sustainable system. There's a bit of transition, right? Transition studies are what's now in every discipline, every department, every university. And that's where the UNA can really help, because we can start to play the key role about asking what comes next. You get the comic representation of it in the New Yorker every once in a while, and so while the end of the world scenario will be rife with unimaginable horrors, we believe that the pre-end period will be filled with unprecedented opportunities for profit. This is true. They speculated on it in Wall Street. In fact, my own university is engaged in a rather tragic encounter on this at this point, where the students are trying to say to the president, get out of fossil fuels. And the president won't even agree to sit down and talk with them. It's staggering. This is going on while 1,400 cities in this country alone are going to be raising sea levels to the point that they're uninhabitable, including where I am, where the feet get wet. In a Category 3 hurricane, there's one little dam that keeps the ocean from coming into MIT, Boston University, Harvard, in one fell swoop. I mean, we are 1 degree away, as it were, in the veering of a hurricane from Haiti northwards, from being a New Orleans. Category 3 hits Boston, that's what it's going to look like. Gondolas will be the mode of transportation. This is not new. In 1992, the youth started pointing this out and making very powerful statements about this.
Hello, I'm Severin Suzuki, speaking for ECHO, the Environmental Children's Organization. We're a group of 12 and 13-year-olds trying to make a difference. Vanessa Setti, Morgan Geisler, Michelle Quigg, and me. We've raised all the money to come here ourselves, to come 5,000 miles to tell you adults you must change your ways.
Okay, I'll let you look up the rest of the speech and listen to it when you have your copious spare time. But I want to indicate that that was a polite statement in 1992. It's gotten more strident ever since. And in fact, if you follow these things, you can see why. Take a look at this one.
The scientific community released a report that proves beyond a doubt that the Earth is getting warmer. This global warming is caused by things you grown-ups do, and by the things you don't. If drastic measures aren't taken soon, by the time I grow up, there won't be any fish left in the sea. Rainforests and clean air will be a thing of the past. The polar ice caps will be gone. Oceans will rise. Entire countries will disappear. Life will change in ways you can't even imagine. There could be famine, worldwide epidemics. Life expectancy will be lower. And we're not just talking about the future. We're talking about my future. But this is no surprise. You adults have known about this for years. And though you could have done something about it, you haven't. You can say, it's not my problem. You can say, I won't be around in 50 years. But from now on, you can't say I didn't know. Starting today, the lines are drawn. You have to choose sides. Either you're for my future, or you're against it. You're a friend, or you're an enemy. I may just be a kid today, but tomorrow will be different. This is the last time I'll be talking to you adults. You've had your chance to fix this problem. Now we have ours. We won't be cute. We won't be patronized. And we will not be denied our future.
Now, the conclusion is simply this, and the youth have to make this clear in December in Paris. There is no planet B. We only have one Earth. We only get one chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weiskel, for that presentation. We're running a little short on time, so I want to go directly to the audience. And if there are no questions from the audience, I have a range of questions that I'm going to batter the panel with. But I do see a question way in the back there. So that's the first hand I saw. I'm going to go there, the gentleman in the blue, and then I'm going to swing around. So, sir, if you can press your mic, that would be excellent. The button, you should have a little... Unless you can project and we can all hear you.
Okay. Can you hear? I guess everyone can hear me. So thank you for this information. One of the biggest challenges, of course, of climate change is the fact that the measure for country success is GDP. Okay, and that's measured year after year, so it's very short-term focused. What are we doing to get countries to think around GDP? Because as long as that measure is in place, corporations and other lobbying groups are going to fight this action. And also, the fact is that we do behave according to how we're measured. So what metrics are we looking at to counter GDP?
Along with somebody else's question saying how we behave according to our measures, do you think it's possible that the accounting method for CO2 emissions by states to include import-based emissions, those embodied in the production of the products that we import into our state, is possible in some type of multilateral binding legislation? Because that would actually, it wouldn't simply vilify the producer states, but it would also hold importer states accountable. So it would hold both the suppliers and those who demand those products accountable, instead of just vilifying those who create the products.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go directly to Dr. Weiskel. I think we'll begin with you at your leisure. We're going to start answering those questions. So thank you very much from the audience. If we have time, we'll certainly take some more, or I even might posit a few. So Dr. Weiskel, the floor is yours.
Okay, let me try to recall what was asked here, but basically metrics is a huge issue. UNDP and others have looked into this with different kinds of indexes instead of gross national product, or some of us call it the national gross product. I mean, you should move beyond that. There are genuine development indexes that are out there. There are hundreds of them out there. Economists are working on this. And none of them are approaching the internalization of costs, which gets to this carbon question and the question of how we should price things. That's the whole point of Sir Nicholas Stern. We're facing the fact that we've done cost-benefit analysis and looked only at the benefits, not looked at the costs. The whole carbon bubble, the carbon moment in human history, is one great big gaspillage of a resource with no cost accounted for in terms of its impact on a global functioning ecosystem. If those costs were internalized, you'd be paying $57 a gallon for gas, right? So, yeah, we got to get the metrics straight, but we also just have to move off of carbon. Not because it's becoming more scarce. A few years ago, we used to think, and on one of the graphs I used, it was the peak oil question that was the great anxiety. We're going to run out of stuff. Well, in fact, we're not going to run out of fossil fuels in any known future, especially with the new technologies used in fracking and the like. It's not the scarcity of the material, it's the impact of the material. We can't survive using that amount of carbon. Just on the post-Columbian city basis. Post-Columbian cities are those that were put in place after Columbus discovered, as it were, the New World. He didn't discover it because it wasn't lost, right? But in any case, the post-Columbian city was put in place, pretty much, at sea level. Because that's how he got here, right? On a boat. The post-Columbian city is under challenge. If you didn't see the graphic here, 1,400 cities in the United States alone. We can't survive in those cities with the combustion of terrestrial carbon. This is why the new movement that's emerging is called the carbon underground. We're trying to keep the carbon underground. And you start doing the metric for that, you measure progress in a very different way. Not how much carbon have you used, but how much have you sequestered? How much have you prevented from being used? Second point about other alternative energies, use the renewable ones. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that nuclear is a solution to anything. If you want to look at externalized costs, think about the tens of thousands of years of the waste products that you have to deal with. We don't even have human languages that have persisted long enough to label the stuff. Right? There used to be a department within the DoD, the Department of Defense in the United States, which is actually trying to think of symbol systems to put on nuclear waste dumps so that people would know after a nuclear exchange had occurred to stay away from this material because it was lethal, because the languages wouldn't be around anymore. Right? We can't cope with the downstream impact of nuclear, let alone the downstream impact of carbon. So don't think nuclear is the solution to this. What you've got to do is run the whole thing on the solar throughput. Now that means water, wind, tidal, micro, hydro, and the like. That is, hydro is a function of the water cycle, and you're placing yourself back into a solar-driven system. But the only, see, we've got the thing 180 degrees around. We think we live on a planet with infinite resources and finite energy. We're struggling over to control that finite energy. In fact, in America, it's so absurd. We think that the world doesn't quite get it. That's our oil in the Middle East, right? It's just a geologic mistake it's in the Middle East. But it's our oil. And we spend a few $1 billion a day sort of making sure the world understands that. It's our oil. We're on the wrong metaphor in the sense that it's not infinite energy that we have moved to, and we need to. The infinite throughput of solar energy. We're thinking we've got finite energy and infinite resources, whereas in fact we have finite resources and infinite energy. So this isn't just a slight correction in metric here and there. It's a compass question. Are we going in the right direction? Not, are we becoming more efficient in the direction in which we're going? All you'll do with that is sort of make extinction more efficient, which really isn't the goal.
No, extinction is not the goal, even if we do it more efficiently. Now, what's happened since Seven Kurosuzaki, age 12, spoke in 1992? She's now 38 years old, right? Full adult, has children of her own. Have we listened to the children over this time? Have we listened to the youth at all? They've been given a chance to speak, but no one hears them. This occurred in
the floor to Ms. Anjali Appadurai with College of the Atlantic, who will speak on behalf of youth non-governmental organizations. Ms. Appadurai, you have the floor.
I speak for more than half the world's population. We are the silent majority. You've given us a seat in this hall, but our interests are not on the table. What does it take to get a stake in this game? Lobbyists, corporate influence, money. You've been negotiating all my life. In that time, you've failed to meet pledges, you've missed targets, and you've broken promises. But you've heard this all before. We're in Africa, home to communities on the front line of climate change. The world's poorest countries need funding for adaptation now. The Horn of Africa and those nearby in Kwamashu needed it yesterday. But as 2012 dawns, our Green Climate Fund remains empty.
That was back in 2012 at Durban. Youth is given a voice, but then no one listens. Do we have time? That's the question in a way.
Global warming. Some say irreversible consequences are 30 years away. 30 years? That won't affect me.
Well, the assertion there is there's still time. There's still time. But we have to ask the question, is that really true? Do we really have time? That was said 15 years ago, about 30 years. That means 15 years from now. And the report shows that the future generations are going to have to shoulder the burden of the expense here. 8.8 trillion climate tab is being left to the next generation. A rather big report was brought out on this and the impact on the millennials. The price tag of being young, climate change, and the millennials' economic future. This is why some are referring to the moral betrayal of our children, because we're starting to reckon the coming cost of climate change denial in our generation, what it's going to cost future generations. Well, kids have started to react to this all over the country. 21 Americans are now suing the government. These are kids are suing the government. You should meet them. They're actually interviewed quite frequently now on American television and the like. And large figures in the economic sphere, like Jeffrey Sachs, have praised their suing the US government and the fossil fuel industry. This is not something that we have to teach children. It's something we need to learn from children. So the serious adult talk has to be in both directions. What can we say to our children? Adult talk on speaking with children about science and survival? Well, we ought to listen to what they've got to say to begin with, and then start to act on the information that they are bringing to our attention again and again. The reason for this is that we need a new kind of alliance, citizen science alliance.